He smiled at me like nothing had changed. But his eyes lingered too long on someone else. The gala shimmered in every direction, glass chandeliers casting fractured halos across the ballroom. Silver trays balancing hors d'oeuvres no one ate, and waiters weaving through clusters of people far too overdressed to be comfortable. It should have felt like victory. After all, this was Brian's world, built on charm, closed-door deals, and curated charity, and I was supposed to be the woman standing beside him, the safe bet. But tonight, he kept tilting his head to the side, laughing too loud, shifting from foot to foot as if bracing for something that hadn't happened yet. When he kissed my temple, I smelled his cologne, familiar. Expensive, but beneath it, something unfamiliar. Tension. There was a moment, barely a flicker, where his hand hovered an inch too far from mine. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd been overworked. Maybe I needed another drink. Or maybe I was starting to see what had always been there. He excused himself to speak with a board member. But I saw where he went. Across the ballroom, a woman stood near the bar, shoulders bare, hair like midnight water, lips too red for a winter fundraiser. She was alone, but not lost. When Brian passed her, his fingers grazed her arm. Just a touch, but it was practiced, intimate, as if his body remembered her even if his conscience tried to forget. I didn't confront him, not there, not yet. Instead, I watched, waited, counted his lies before they left his mouth. An hour later, I found him by the patio, scrolling his phone. I walked toward him, calling his name. He turned it off too fast. But not before I saw the screen. A photo, a boy, curly hair, dimples, big, trusting eyes, and underneath the image, the name, Noah. I froze. Brian smiled. Casual. Oh, that? Client's kid. Cute, huh? He pocketed the phone before I could say anything else. Then he kissed my cheek and said he had an early meeting. Left without a coat, without even asking if I needed a ride. I followed, slipped out after him, heels in hand, adrenaline thick in my throat. I don't remember what excuse I mumbled to Clara, who'd barely arrived. Something vague, something about a headache. She nodded, distracted, already deep in conversation with one of the PR leads. I doubt she even saw me go. The cold San Francisco air bit into my skin as I reached my car. Brian's taillights disappeared around the corner. But I knew the direction. The back streets of Mission Hill weren't exactly his usual territory. 10 minutes later, I saw him again. His car parked crookedly in front of a condo building with ivy crawling up its brick facade. He wasn't alone. At the gate, he stood with the same woman from the gala. She leaned into him, one hand resting just above his belt. He didn't pull away. He leaned in. Then he kissed her. I didn't blink. Couldn't. The world went quiet except for the blood in my ears. And then he said her name, Sienna. The way he said it, gentle, like a memory, made my stomach twist. I killed the headlights and sank deeper into the driver's seat. This wasn't a mistake. It was a life he had built outside mine. Something he had curated, just like every inch of his reputation. The front door opened. Warm light spilled out. And then I saw the boy, Noah, run out, yelling, "Daddy." They erased my name to protect the family. But I never agreed to disappear. The Carter estate sat on the cliffs like a monument to restraint. No gaudy gates or fountains, just gray stone, silent walls, and windows that refused to show anything but sky. I hadn't been here in months, maybe years, and even now, I didn't come out of longing. I came with questions Brian couldn't answer, and a fury only one person had earned. The butler, Thomas, opened the door before I could knock. He'd been here since I was 6. Taller now, slower maybe, but his eyes still softened when they saw me. "Miss Madeline," he said gently, stepping aside. "She's in the music room." Of course she was. That was Rebecca's sanctuary, the only place she allowed chaos in the form of Chopin and Shostakovich. I found her by the window, in a camel-colored wool dress, eyes fixed on the bay. She didn't turn when I entered. "You look thin," she said. "I came to talk about Brian." A pause. "Not everything is about him." "No," I said, "but this is." I told her what I saw. Brian's hand on another woman's waist. The kiss. The child calling him daddy. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I let the words hang there like smoke, waiting to see if she'd swat them away or inhale. Rebecca exhaled slowly. "You'll need a lawyer. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say? That I'm surprised? I'm not." She finally turned. Her hair was perfectly pinned. Her expression unreadable. You always thought you were immune to rot because you married smart. But rot doesn't care how sharp your smile is. It creeps in anyway. That's rich. Coming from you. You think I didn't notice how he handled you at that gala? He treats you like a delicate heirloom. Pretty. Fragile. Replaceable. I'm not fragile. Then stop acting like it. I laughed. Bitter. You erased me, remember? You made sure no one knew I was your daughter. Said it was to protect the Carter name. You were a child, she said. You didn't understand the consequences of visibility. The press. The legacy. You still don't. But you do. You always did. She looked past me, her silence louder than any scream. You think I disappeared? I continued, but I was always watching. Learning. Rebecca adjusted her bracelet, then added almost casually. There's a trust fund. You might want to look into it. A trust? For emergencies. This counts. I left her there, drowning in silence and pride, and made my way to the study. The room smelled like cedar and ink. I found the filing cabinet without asking. Bottom drawer. Back folder, Carter Holdings. Trust 318. The documents weren't just financial, they were a map. A sealed envelope marked, Beneficiary, Madeline Carter, see Alt. ID, and a second document. Equity transfer authorization for 18% stake in Wakefield Group, held in my name since I was 17. I traced the lines of the signature, hers. Notarized. Not Brian's. Not even my own. I had never disappeared. I'd been hidden. My phone buzzed. Clara. Still want the truth? I stared at the message. Then at the papers in my hand. Something was starting to shift inside me. Not rage. Not yet. Just clarity. I wasn't just Mrs. Holt. I was the forgotten Carter, and now I wanted it all back. To take down a man like Brian, you don't need rage, you need receipts. Clara waited at the corner table of a coffeehouse that smelled too much like cinnamon and not enough like coffee. She was dressed in a slate gray blazer and had 2 Americanos waiting, hers already half gone. I slid into the seat across from her and didn't bother with pleasantries. He lied, I said. I figured. She replied. The question is, how deep? The folder she handed me was slim, but dense. Redacted wire transfers, offshore account summaries, names I didn't recognize. One stood out. SV. Multiple entries. Significant sums. Sienna Vale, Clara said, not even glancing at the page. The one from the gala. How long? At least 3 years. She wasn't just his mistress, she was on the payroll. I stared at the numbers. This wasn't lust, it was logistics. He'd built her into our finances. We left the coffeehouse without finishing our drinks. Clara's office was just a few blocks away, tucked behind an antique bookstore. The moment we stepped inside, the noise of the city evaporated. No windows, thick doors, moody lighting, a couch that looked comfortable but never used. Alex was already waiting, young, inked forearms, typing with a rhythm that didn't pause for introductions. I pulled metadata from that beach photo you mentioned, he said, without looking up. Brian, Sienna, and the kid, Noah. Taken in Cabo last April. GPS confirms it. Clara turned to me. You were in New York that week for your cousin's wedding, right? I nodded slowly. I remembered the photos Brian had sent of him, working late, in the office. I remembered defending him when my aunt asked why he wasn't with me. Alex slid another screen toward us, this one a spreadsheet. There's more. Shell company under Wakefield's consulting wing. Payments labeled as wellness expenses, all routed to SV's bank. Which means asset concealment, maybe marital fraud, depending on how the prenup reads. I swallowed. We didn't have a prenup. Clara's eyes lit with something close to approval. Then this is better than I thought. I felt dizzy, not from the deceit, but from how clearly it all fit. There had been signs. Vacations canceled last minute. Forgotten birthdays. The way he kept his phone screen face down at dinner. But now those memories weren't fog, they were files. Data. Evidence. I went home that night not to mourn, but to hunt. Brian's office had always been off limits, he claimed it was for privacy. But now I knew it was about control. I combed through his desk drawers, cracked open old binders, scanned for anything that didn't belong. And then, behind a row of leather-bound finance books, I found a panel with a subtle seam. A safe. Unmarked. No dial. Just a biometric pad. I stared at it, pulse rising. Then I did what I'd never dared before. I pressed my thumb against the sensor. It clicked. Inside was a burner phone. Screen already lit up. Dozens of messages. All from Brian to Sienna. Most were banal. Need anything for Noah, or traffic's hell. See you soon. But some were worse. Photos of Noah in Halloween costumes. Noah asleep with a toy I'd never seen. Noah learning to ride a bike, with Brian's hand steadying him. And then there were texts, longer. More calculated. One at the top caught my breath mid-throat. Just 6 more months. Brian had texted. Then she'll be out of the picture. He left without a word a decade ago. Now he holds the key to my future, and maybe my heart. The elevator opened to a silence so polished it could have been carved. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the San Francisco skyline in shades of gold and steel. The penthouse of Wakefield HQ wasn't just a workspace, it was a monument to legacy. And apparently, a theater for awkward reunions. Clara had told me, vaguely, that there was someone I needed to meet. She hadn't said his name. But when the man turned from the window, I knew. Ethan Wakefield. His hair was a little shorter now. The sharpness in his jaw had softened into maturity. But those eyes, gray, unreadable, held the same quiet defiance that had once made me believe in things I didn't yet understand. He looked at me for a long beat. Then, Madeline. His voice hadn't changed. Still low, still deliberate. Ethan. A pause. Too long to be comfortable. Too short to be forgiving. Nora, his assistant, cleared her throat. You two know each other? We went to college together. Ethan said. And then he disappeared. I added, without breaking eye contact. Clara took that as her cue to step out. The room was too quiet once she did. Nice place, I said, walking toward the window. Didn't think you'd stay in the family business. Didn't think you'd marry into it. Touché. He motioned toward the conference table where a folder lay. My name was printed on the tab. You're now a shareholder, he said. 18%. It's complicated. Not really, I said. I was always a Carter. I just didn't know how much that name cost until now. He sat down, fingers steepled. Why are you really here? Because Brian's been siphoning money. Because he has a secret family. Because someone in this building has the power to stop him, and I don't trust anyone but myself. He nodded slowly. And what do you want from me? I want you to remember who I was before all this. He hesitated. Something shifted behind his eyes. You still wear it, he said. It took me a second. I looked down, my wrist. The silver bracelet, worn smooth by time, never removed. He'd given it to me the night of the winter formal. Back in sophomore year, the night he kissed me under snowlight. The night he vanished the next morning without goodbye. You left, I said. No calls, no letters. My father made me, he said if I stayed, the money stopped. I was 20 and afraid of being nothing. You were never nothing, I whispered. He looked away. When he spoke again, his voice had that controlled edge, the tone of someone who spent years learning how not to bleed. I'll help you, he said finally, but not as a Wakefield executive. Only if you ask as yourself. My heart stuttered, but not from romance. From the shift, the balance returning, I stepped closer, just enough for him to hear my voice without needing to read my lips. Then help me, I said, not as your ex, as your equal. There's nothing more dangerous than a woman with proof, and nothing left to lose. The townhouse looked the same as ever, clean surfaces, neutral tones, a fireplace that hadn't been lit since last winter. The scent of rosemary chicken floated from the kitchen. A meal prepped by their housekeeper but reheated by routine. Brian sat at the head of the table, scrolling something on his tablet, fork untouched beside a half-full glass of wine. I took the seat opposite him, set down the envelope slowly, deliberately, not loud enough to be dramatic, just enough for him to feel it. He didn't look up. What's that? I folded my hands in my lap. You should read it. He tapped his screen one last time, then slid the tablet aside, opened the envelope, pulled out the papers. His jaw twitched before he even reached the second page. A divorce? Yes. This is absurd. He looked up, eyes darting. You're overreacting. To what? The offshore accounts? The second family? Or the plan to erase me once you were done? Brian stood, pushing his chair back too fast. That's not what. This is all a misunderstanding. I tapped my phone screen and slid it across the table. Pressed play. His voice crackled through the speakers. Confident, smug, Just 6 more months. Then she'll be out of the picture. Once the trust clears and the assets are clean, I'll make my move. She's too soft to fight back. The silence that followed was louder than the recording. Brian lunged for the phone. I snatched it back. He froze mid-reach, hands hovering. You've been spying on me? I've been surviving you. His voice dropped, low and venomous. You think this makes you strong? This makes you pathetic. No, Brian, what makes me strong is that every lie you told has a paper trail, and I own the pen. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared. I saw it then, the flicker of panic. Not guilt, never guilt, just the fear of losing. The housekeeper stepped in to check the oven, but quickly backed out. Brian didn't notice. He sat back down, slower this time. We can fix this. We don't have to go nuclear. This is me being polite. His hand clenched around the stem of his wine glass. You'll regret this. I stood, collected the papers he hadn't signed, and tucked them back into the envelope. No, Brian, you will. I didn't come to destroy a child's life. I came to make sure he knew the truth. The rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windshield as I parked outside Sienna's modest home. Gray siding, small yard, nothing like the polished facades of San Francisco. A quiet suburb in San Jose. Early January 2024. Thorns of guilt pricked my heart. But I'd set my purpose before leaving the townhouse. Compassion doesn't mean mercy for Brian. It means clarity for his child. Sienna opened the door with wary eyes and wet hair. Madeline, she said softly, no greeting, no accusation. Cold afternoon light sifted into her living room, mismatched cushions. A single family portrait tucked in a bookcase. She led me inside without a word. We sat at a small wooden table. A neighbor waved as they passed by the window. Otherwise, silence reigned. I never wanted you involved. Sienna began, voice shaking. He promised he'd leave you, for me. Then said, this wasn't your fight. She paused, water beads trembling on her lashes. I folded my hands. This is my fight, but not against you, or him. It's for Noah. She winced. Noah, 5, burst in through the kitchen door, cheeks red from the rain. He held a tiny toy car and looked at me with curious, knowing eyes. Mama, who's that? Sienna cleared her throat. Madeline, this is? Knows. He didn't wait. Daddy's friend? I leaned forward and smiled gently. Hi Noah, I'm someone who cares about you. I offered the toy car back. He took it, eyes flicking between us. Then he said, in that quiet certainty only children have, Daddy's here? My chest tightened. I nodded slowly. He cares about you. Yes. Noah looked relieved, then studied my face. You're not scary, he said, matter of fact. My defenses trembled. Sienna sank deeper into her chair. He never changed, she whispered, voice breaking. He left me, then slipped back, and he told Noah, said he was protecting him. I kept my face calm. That's not protection, that's avoidance. My words hung in the moist air. She looked at me, searching. Finally, she reached across the table and pressed a drawer's edge. Here. I opened it slowly. A plain black phone, old model. Sienna's thumb hovered. You'll want to see these texts. My breath caught. Not evidence for court, evidence for truth, knows truth. Brian spinning stories to a little boy who deserved better. I set the phone down and met Sienna's wary gaze. Thank you. She swallowed. He never said sorry, only said he needed space. I tucked the phone inside my coat. We'll give him a chance to explain. Then we decide what's best, together. She nodded, hesitant relief sweeping over her features. Outside, rain faded. Africa of suburbia, with its soft hush. A small boy's toy rolled across the floor. Innocence, still intact. I stood to leave. Sienna rose, watching me. Noah peeked around her leg. As I walked to my car, I felt the weight shift, not just the battle for my rights, but a new responsibility. Protect this child from the fallout of his father's lies. Old love doesn't just fade. It hides, until something reignites it. The rooftop garden atop Wakefield HQ was rarely used, but tonight it pulsed with quiet intimacy. Post-rain air clung gently to the leaves. Strings of warm Edison bulbs cast amber glows over the stone paths and steel benches. San Francisco shimmered below, its skyline sharp and distant. Clara had called it a soft launch, space for ideas. She wasn't wrong. Ethan was already there, reviewing a folder under low light. His coat was slung casually over one chair. sleeves rolled above his wrists. When he looked up and saw me, he didn't smile, but something in his posture eased. "We're ready for the media package," he said, handing me the folder. "The legal documents are airtight. Clara confirmed it with her team. When you drop this, there's no going back." I nodded, flipping through the carefully arranged press angles. Corporate betrayal. Misallocated funds. Silent shareholder reclaiming her name. "I want the story to lead with Noah," I said. "He's the reason." Ethan studied me for a long moment. "You always cut through the noise." I closed the folder. Noise never scared me. Silence did. He sat, motioned for me to join. I did. Below us, car lights streamed like veins of light. Above us, a fog tried to settle but hadn't quite found permission. "You never told me why you came back," I said. He leaned back, his voice quieter than the breeze. 3 years ago, the board pushed me out. They said I wasn't ruthless enough. Too sentimental. And now? Now Clara showed me a name in a shareholder file I hadn't seen in a decade. I looked at him. Steady. Madeline Carter Holt. I remembered the Carter. I tried to forget the rest. A pause stretched. Not awkward, just full. Then, without flourish, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth pouch. I knew it before he opened it. The bracelet. The same silver band he'd clasped around my wrist the night of the winter formal. The one that slipped off when I danced in the snow. "I found it in a box," he said. "Never could throw it away." He held it out, not as a gift, but a question. My fingers closed around the metal. Cool. Familiar. We didn't speak for a moment. Instead, we sat with the sound of the city and the wind and our shared history. "You know," I said, "I used to think losing you was the punishment. Now I see it made space for this." He turned toward me, eyes softer now. "I came back for one reason," he said, "to help you win. When you've been underestimated long enough, your silence becomes your sharpest blade." The Wakefield Global Tech Conference pulsed with the arrogance of money and the hum of staged anticipation. Over 300 executives, shareholders, press members, and invited influencers buzzed in their velvet chairs beneath chandeliers that cost more than some small homes. The ballroom had been transformed into a media stage, one that was about to become a reckoning ground. Brian strode onto the stage with all the confidence of a man who thought he'd won. His suit was immaculate, his smile, weaponized. He tapped the microphone once, unnecessarily, and leaned forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "as you may have heard, there's been chatter, unfounded accusations, wild theories. Let me set the record straight." Ethan, seated beside me in the front row, leaned just slightly toward my shoulder. "Ready?" I stood before I could answer. Brian faltered mid-sentence as I climbed the stage steps. "Madeline," he said, trying to mask irritation, "this isn't." I took the mic from his hand without looking at him. "My name is Madeline Carter Wakefield," I said, 18% stakeholder, legal beneficiary of Rebecca Carter's trust, wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, of Brian Holt. And today, I'm here to correct more than the record. The room stilled. I held up a sleek folder. This contains over 40 pages of documented financial misconduct, shell company transfers, false expense reports, concealed ownership of property, all tied to Brian Holt. Whispers flared. Cameras clicked. I turned to the massive screen behind me. Motioned to Clara. "Play it." The first clip was Brian's voice. "Once the trust clears and the assets are clean, I'll make my move. She's too soft to fight back." The second was video. Brian with Sienna and Noah. Time-stamped vacations overlapping with corporate travel bills. Murmurs turned to gasps. Clara stepped up beside me. Legal briefs in hand. "We've confirmed that Madeline Wakefield possesses full shareholder rights and a power of attorney clause previously hidden in the Carter Trust documentation. Brian Holt's actions not only breached marital ethics, but corporate fiduciary responsibilities." Sienna emerged from the back. A quiet force in a simple black dress. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence alone rewrote the subtext. Security flanked Brian now. He was red. Breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. "You set me up," he hissed. "No," I replied. "You laid the trap yourself. I just turned on the lights." As he was escorted out, cameras captured every angle, his fall. My calm. I faced the room again. For years, I was the silent one. The background. The woman behind the man. I paused, Felt the hush settle like smoke. From today forward, I said, I speak as a Wakefield, and no one's pawn. Cornered men don't surrender. They try to drag you down with them. The courthouse steps were slick with condensation as the press assembled like vultures sensing a wounded animal. San Francisco's winter sun offered no warmth. Only clarity, and today, clarity belonged to me. Inside, the gallery buzzed. Brian entered with 2 lawyers at his side, dressed in black as if already mourning his credibility. He refused to look my way. The suit was dramatic in its desperation, defamation, interference with corporate relations, intentional emotional harm. Clara had called it laughable. I didn't laugh. Judge Monroe presided with sharp eyes and an impatient gavel. Mr. Holt, she began, you allege your reputation has been unjustly damaged. You'll need extraordinary evidence for such a claim, especially given the documented findings from Wakefield Group's audit. Brian's attorney droned on, citing email chains, manipulated recordings, and deliberate character assassination. Clara sat beside me, serene, thumbing through a thick binder labeled simply, facts. When our turn came, Clara stood. We have location metadata, IP logs, transaction records, sworn witness statements, all validating the timeline. Mr. Holt's defamation claim collapses under its own inconsistencies. She tapped the screen. One by one, slides flashed. Sienna's bank deposits. Brian's burner phone messages. A hotel receipt signed under an alias he once bragged about during a board dinner. Then came the testimony. Sienna took the stand. No makeup, no pretenses. He said I'd ruin everything if I talked. She told the court. He told me Madeline was fragile, that she'd break if she knew. But he was the one lying to both of us. For years. Her voice didn't shake. Brian tried to interrupt, was silenced. By noon, it was over. Judge Monroe leaned forward. Mr. Holt, your suit lacks merit. Evidence presented by the defense is conclusive. This court not only dismisses your claims, it orders you to cover all legal expenses incurred by Ms. Wakefield. A murmur rippled through the room like a cracked dam. Outside, the wind cut sharper. Reporters swarmed, lights flashing. I descended the steps slowly, flanked by Clara and the PR director. Ethan stayed behind, honoring my space. A reporter thrust a mic forward. Madeline, what's next for you? I paused, let the question settle in my chest. I smiled. Everything. Not every victory looks like a war. Some feel like a sunrise. Twilight poured gently over the Carter estate, tinting the garden in hues of soft lavender and gold. Lanterns swung from the branches like glowing promises. Their light warm but never harsh. The breeze carried hints of wisteria and rosemary. It was spring again, and this time, it didn't feel like a return. It felt like a beginning. Guests moved quietly, respectfully. This wasn't a gala, or a statement, it was a pause. A breath, a small celebration of something larger than revenge, reclamation. Madeline stood near the stone fountain, its water now clear after years of neglect. Rebecca approached slowly, her pearls catching the last light of day. I never wanted you to carry the weight I carried, Rebecca said, her voice lower than usual. But I see now. Maybe I should have let you carry your own name. She reached into her clutch, pulled out a slim envelope, and handed it to Madeline in front of the gathered few. Effective immediately. The Carter Trust reflects your full rights, she said, and your full name. A hush passed like wind through the garden. Madeline nodded, not with defiance but with peace. In the distance, Grace giggled, her bare feet kicking through grass as she chased Bubbles with Noah. The 2 children had grown close in the short time they'd met. Bonded by something unspoken, perhaps knowing what it meant to start again. Ethan waited beneath the arched trellis, dressed in a simple navy suit. No ringbox, no spotlight, just him. Madeline walked to him, her hand brushing his lightly. You still don't do grand gestures, she teased. He smiled, only the kind that last. Then, without kneeling, without fanfare, he looked her in the eyes. If you'll let me, I'd like to be the one who stays this time. Not behind you, not in front of you, beside you. It wasn't a proposal, it was a promise. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said, but not because I need saving. Because I want to walk forward, and I want you there. From the side, Sienna approached with a folder. Her eyes met Madeline's, not rivals anymore, but 2 women who'd survived the same storm. This is the joint guardianship paperwork. she said softly. For Noah, I thought. You should have a say. Madeline accepted the folder. Thank you, she whispered, for trusting me. As the evening deepened, the children collapsed into the picnic blanket. Drowsy with laughter, music played faintly from a nearby speaker, old jazz. Mellow and warm. Ethan leaned closer. You okay? He asked. She looked around, at her name restored. At her chosen family. At the life she'd rebuilt not through fury, but clarity. She smiled, her voice low, steady, true. This time, she whispers to Ethan, I choose me, and you. The woman once sidelined by secrets stood now in full light. Not as a victim, but as a name they couldn't erase. What was taken from her, truth, legacy, love, was reclaimed not through vengeance, but through unwavering resolve, like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody. Justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. When injustice is met with steady courage, the verdict doesn't just change a name, it rewrites a future. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth.